Brian Mudd Show is on News Radio 610 WIOD.
A lot of people, me included, really wasn't a huge fan of the work-from-home concepts, but we've proven that the technology can work. We've proven that we can continue to inject culture into our activities. And so every company's got to kind of look at how they're going to do that in the future.
Yeah, and a lot of people have said, you know what, I also am not fond of paying close to $5 a gallon for gas either. One more reason, maybe I want to work from home if there's an opportunity to do it. You know, if you go back even before inflation and everything more recently, we had seen where the average person who had been remote working kind of want to stay in that environment, not the huge demand to go back to the office. And, well, the voice you just heard happened to be one Joel Patterson, website joelpatterson.com, happens to be joining us now. Joel, so what's going on? I mean, workplace trends, are they going to maintain?
Well, trend is kind of a weird word to use these days when it comes to business. I mean, there's such these crazy swings in what's going on.
Yeah.
You know, on one hand is how quickly can we get them away? Now, how quickly can we get them back? And what we're finding is, I think as we may or may not be heading into a recession, people are looking at the situation and recognizing, well, maybe I don't have as much leverage as an employee as I once had. Maybe I need to be thinking about whether or not I need to go into the office, or at least be there, part of the time. And really starting to go back to some of the things that we focused on before the pandemic around culture, around relationships. Clearly, everything has changed, and it's not going to be what it was 2 years ago. But there are a lot of things that are starting to swing back as people recognize, especially for the young people. You know, you think about they've started a job. They may have not met anybody in person that they've been working with for 2 years. And that's not uncommon now. And that's starting to really have an impact on how people view their career.
Joel, I want to pick up there because this is the first thing that comes to mind. I mean, there are high-profile examples of some of this taking place. Elon Musk, for example, and Tesla, where he put out an edict and said, hey, you get back to the office by this date or you don't have a job here anymore. And, we have seen a number of companies that have engaged, often in technology, and layoffs. Cryptocurrency is in full-on crash mode. Miami in particular has been a hub for crypto. There's pain that's being felt right here in South Florida that's specific to that. Much of it remote types of environments. And so my question is, because, reality is what we've experienced in the job market is not going to continue that way. The question is just, where does this thing ultimately shake out? And, for companies that are looking at potential layoffs, are they most inclined to start with these remote workers that, to your point, in some cases, maybe they haven't even met the employees?
Well, I think it's only natural that they would do so because they don't have the relationship. They don't have the water cooler talk or even just the visibility to the work that they might be doing as much. So it's, people talk about it. You try not to be too or be overly sensitive to that, but it's just natural, I think. So those things are going to have to be brought into play. And I think people really have to look at this and from their own career perspective is, am I hurting my career chances long-term by staying home or really digging in? Because you mentioned Elon Musk, Goldman Sachs, Apple, Amazon, all these companies have put out edicts at one time or another about getting people back in the office, and every single one of them have flopped, essentially. And it's really interesting to see how much the employee base has really created this leverage. But again, as a recession or as a downturn happens, I think that's going to shift a little bit. And really, even on that recession piece, one thing I want to make sure, this is how I look at this. Over the last few years, we had this crazy buildup. I think a lot of the layoffs that we're seeing are really tied to people that have overbuilt during a little bit of mania. I don't see a lot of when I'm looking around at the labor market, it's still pretty tight. There's still a lot of demand out there. The things that I'm hearing on the news, I'm just not seeing out in the industry right now. And that doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but I don't see it being as intense as we might have thought it would be at once.
Well, that is encouraging to hear you say that, given that you're in the middle of this every day. Should we interpret, this line of thinking to mean that if it's optional right now to be remote working and, we are, especially desirous of maintaining our current employment, that perhaps we should rethink the remote strategy?
Well, I think the remote strategy is going to be here for good no matter what. It's just how much of a strategy is it? And if we can get to even early on, everybody was saying, if we could do 3 days in the office or somewhere around there, I think everybody would be fine. People would be able to get the benefit of being home. But now, I mean, there's still about a third of the people have returned to the office full time since the pandemic started. And it just doesn't seem to be happening on its own. And people haven't felt enough pain yet to make them really feel the pinch that they have to go in no matter what happens. And you mentioned gas. I mean, all of those things come into play. The new Omicron variants that are coming out, that's certainly going to be part of the conversation. I mean, it's just not a simple solution for one company or another. Everybody's got to look at it and decide what they can really manage while balancing their culture and the tight labor market and the difficulties in recruiting and retaining. I mean, there's a lot of challenges out there to overcome these days.
Joel, you mentioned kind of like the hybrid strategy. I haven't really discussed this, but it's been on my mind right along. I never really got that, like, at all. And what I mean by that is if there were, times that people would report in the office because there's very specific needs to be there that maybe weren't there other times, I could see, hey, we need everybody at the office this particular day because of X. But just to say, hey, we're doing a few on, a couple off, that to me seems so arbitrary, and I never understood the point of it. Is there a point to it?
Yeah, and it's got to be more calculated than that. I think that you've got to find reasons for people to be. You don't want to just say, hey, you got to be here because I say you got to be here. You got to create that reason, whether it's team meetings or even just social events that you might schedule so that people have an opportunity to interact. I agree with you. If you just go at it and flippantly say, oh, you just show up whenever you want, but you got to be here 3 days a week, that's really not going to do anything for anybody. What I have seen, though, is so what we've done is we don't mandate it other than just our monthly all-hands meeting. But we've got probably 20 to 30 people in the office most days, and usually they're scheduled around specific meetings. We'll have clients in the office. There are a lot of things that we do just to create FOMO, to get people there. So you've got to be intentional about it. You can't just can't be flippant about it. But there's an element of that hybrid that works because it is nice to be home and be able to do some work if you're in a position that allows you to do that, or do the laundry or make sure the kids are okay. So, finding that balance is key.
Well, I mean, it's all good info. Any advice right now for people who are looking to maybe switch jobs, switch careers? You're starting to hear a little bit more nervousness because of the concerns about a recession. Sounds like it's still a decent time to do that.
It is. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's a great time to be looking. If you are not satisfied in what you're doing, at least take a look. But the one thing I always tell people is make sure that you also communicate with your current employer, because if you're just unhappy about one thing, you're probably going to be a lot better off in the long run by fixing that one thing rather than chasing the grass is always greener, which we know a lot of times it isn't. So just make sure you're looking at both sides. But it's a great time to still be looking.
Joel, appreciate it. Good info.
Thank you, Brian.